Thanks for the kind introduction, Pablo. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the contributions ASQ has made to the advancement of quality professionals and providing forums for us to collaborate and share our knowledge and experiences. In my 14 years at Mission Control in Houston during Gemini and Apollo, I learned that quality is a state of mind, not an activity. We won the space race because everyone involved was accountable for their own actions. The various quality groups existed to create operational procedures and work instructions that were used for training and to minimize the opportunities for human error. After leaving NASA, I was fortunate to run 3 different manufacturing operations. I learned that in private industry, workers did not have the same motivations as we did in landing men on the moon. Coherent process control, continual training, and meaningful metrics were the cornerstones to ensuring acceptable outgoing quality. I also learned valuable lessons reporting directly to the CEOs. Outgoing quality was only a small component of their priorities. Growing their market share, creating a return on investment for the shareholders were their driving motivations. In my work with more than 700 companies as an auditor, QMS implementer, and consultant, it was apparent that very few of my colleagues were aware of the need for them to be business as well as quality advocates. I'll repeat that theme throughout this presentation as it's vital for the future of quality management. Additionally, over the last 2 decades, I've applied my quality auditing skills in products liability and organizational negligence litigation. As an expert witness, I have seen the results of process variability, poor training, and lack of accountability leading to catastrophic outcomes and loss of human life. As we discuss foreseeable risk and risk avoidance, my hope is that you look at your products and services through the lens of doing no harm to the customer and avoiding lawsuits that can destroy your organization. Let's begin by taking a 20,000-foot look at your organization. As we just discussed, most companies exist to deliver functional and reliable products and services to an ever-growing customer base. In privately held companies, the owners are continually striving to increase profits and market share. In publicly traded companies, senior management is also accountable to a board of directors who are focused on return on investment and the success of the company in its marketplace. Entrepreneurial startup companies often evolve pragmatically and organically as they grow. The need for formal process control and quality management is often based on problem resolution becoming the most compelling part of the manager's workday. Having to spend money on quality professionals is typically out of desperation, not a strategic growth plan. In the early days of ISO 9001 implementation, my assignments were to get companies certified as quickly and inexpensively as possible because I had customers requiring them to be certified. In recent years, most of my QMS implementation or upgrade assignments have been rescue missions of dysfunctional companies. Efforts to control processes, create competencies, and implement metrics to run the organization are typically met with resistance and often achieve less than desired outcomes. The pain of change is often greater than the pain of living with ineffective processes and people who are invested in the way things always were. Whether by necessity or by strategic planning, each function in your organization has specific tasks with outcomes that are measurable or expected to meet your cultural norms. How each group defines and measures their output is often less objective and more subjective. We've been taught by quality leaders and organizational efficiency experts that we must dismantle silos and work harmoniously towards accomplishing the prime mission of the company. Unfortunately, it's part of our culture that being a manager suggests certain autonomy and fosters the opioid of power. It's my experience that very few organizations have been able to successfully integrate all functions into coherent and efficient work teams. Quality professionals have comprehensive tools that focus on coherent process control and minimizing human error. Unfortunately, the process optimization tools are seldom used outside the direct function of the QMS. Like other groups within an organization, quality professionals are often so invested in their craft they don't focus on how process excellence fits into the key objectives of senior management. We spend our energies in perfecting our tools, not in being aware of and contributing to the overall health and success of the company. There's been quite a bit written lately that the patina of Six Sigma is wearing off, and business leaders are focusing on return on investment of the overhead and manpower required to keep a lean Six Sigma program operational. Likewise, the number of ISO 9001 certifications are dropping as CFOs question the cost of maintaining certifications, while the sales managers no longer see pressure from their customer base for ISO 9001 certifications to be mandatory. Like doctors, we each have our specialties and unique skills to fix ailments. If we're to be valued contributors to the overall health of the organization, we must expand our specialties and move to a more holistic approach to business management instead of quality management. Given the conundrums and challenges we've just outlined, the imperatives that I propose in this presentation are threefold. First, we must broaden our business acumen and become more in sync with the objectives of the organization. Unfortunately, the business objectives are often unclear or not codified. We'll discuss later how our abilities in creating quality objectives might be used to help senior management create immutable vision, mission, and values. Second, at the end of this presentation, it should become clear that our greatest contribution to the success of your business is to eliminate foreseeable risk and potential liability. Finally, I submit that we examine our paradigms and become the champions of creating a culture of risk avoidance and no defect ever reaching a customer. The Oxford Dictionary defines risk as a situation involving exposure to danger. According to the Risk Management Institute, risk management involves understanding, analyzing, and addressing risk to make sure organizations achieve their objectives. The ISO TC 176 guidance document for ISO 9001-2015 suggests that risk-based thinking is intended to establish a systematic approach to considering risk rather than treating prevention as a separate component of a quality management system. The document goes on to state that risk-based thinking is something we all do automatically in everyday life. In ISO 31000-2018, risk management guidelines state that the purpose of risk management is to create and protect value. In the 8 principles outlined in that standard, one tenet includes how risk management anticipates, detects, acknowledges, and responds to changes. The gamut of definition of risks runs from something we avoid automatically in our daily lives to dangers that businesses evade to protect value, adhere to regulation, and avoid lawsuits. How do enlightened business managers decide which definition of risk is appropriate for their organization? How do quality professionals provide guidance and tools for risk abatement in those organizations? How do organizations immunize themselves from potential civil litigation? Clearly, the quality profession accepts risk management as evolution of preventive action. Unfortunately, the same term, risk management, is an entire industry that primarily focuses on statutory and regulatory compliance and monetizing the cost of risk. In legal parlance, risk is the basis for products liability and organizational negligence litigation. My work as an expert witness uses quality standards auditing techniques to prove acceptable or negligent standard of care by a defendant company. In my opinion, the definition of risk-based thinking as something we do automatically in our everyday life is an oxymoron. Read any newspaper or social media to discover that strategic thinking is woefully lacking in society. As quality professionals, we would be out of our jobs if it were true that risk-based thinking is widely prevalent. To begin defining risk as an enterprise-wide imperative, this simple table may provide a tool for your initial approach to engaging management in the cultural shift from risk management to risk avoidance. These questions could be an icebreaker. Has senior management communicated the core values and vision of the founders to all members of the organization and then enforced them? This question typically opens a Pandora's box, because most business leaders had not formally identified their core values. Asking this question of your coworkers, you'll likely get a wide range of opinions on what the core values of the organization are. The question about enforcement is particularly poignant because most companies do not apply the rules of decorum equally. Are business processes clearly defined and expected outcomes measured? Note the question is about business processes, not quality management processes. Are your customer service representatives always busy? This question catches most people off guard. The best answer is no. We have hardly any warranty or customer service issues. Have long-time customers of your organization stopped buying from you? This is another commonly overlooked sign of business risk. If you're not following up with customers that have stopped using your product or service, you're missing an opportunity to uncover foreseeable risk. My experiences validate the proposition that the creation of defects that lead to liability exposure and danger is avoidable. Most risk is avoidable because it can be foreseeable. Before I became an expert witness, I was oblivious to the reality that process variability could lead to catastrophic fires, injury, loss of property, and death. My realization of this led to the thesis that our traditional approach to proactive quality management was fundamentally flawed. Those who employ tools such as failure mode and effect analysis uncover potentially detrimental process inconsistencies in their investigations. Those who mine assessment of risk using PARs for improvement ideas are seldom proactive enough to be effective for risk avoidance. Rarely is preventive action a result of an epiphany or a flash of genius, nor are PARs typically the result of cognitive risk investigations. Even more uncommon is a formal program of foreseeable risk implemented as an immutable and proactive cultural mandate. The trigger for implementing a mandate of risk avoidance is too often the outcome of a product or service being involved in a massively costly failure or some human tragedy. Of more than 40 cases where I have testified in products liability, every single catastrophic failure was foreseeable and avoidable. Even more egregious, 100% of the ISO 9001 certified defendants were not following their own procedures. Here I've depicted risk in a more visual format. Having lived Project Apollo and having worked with scores of for-profit companies, I've created a comparison of the life cycle of Project Apollo compared to the life cycle of a hypothetical organization. The rows depict the stages of evolution. The left vertical axis is the success potential from the lowest to the greatest. The right vertical axis depicts risk potential from the greatest to the lowest. The bell curves represent the relative success potential and risk at any point in the evolution of the organization. In the early stages of Project Apollo, there were many evolving technologies that were coming together for the first time. There were so many variables that we were at our lowest success potential and greatest risk potential. As pioneers, we took assumed risks where we knew there could be catastrophic outcomes. In this case, it manifested itself tragically in the Apollo 1 launch pad fire that killed 3 astronauts. The failure analysis concluded that there were unforeseeable outcomes with new technologies and unproven designs being sealed in a pure oxygen environment with a hatch door that couldn't be opened. We overcame those obstacles and reached our greatest triumph and lowest risk with the successful lunar landing and safe return of the Apollo 11 mission. Then our due diligence began to wane. We had another success with Apollo 12, and as the news media reported, lunar landings were becoming routine, until the Apollo 13 explosion and near-fatal mission. The oxygen tank that exploded was not mission certified and was mistakenly installed by a technician. That was human error and the definition of foreseeable risk. The training was inadequate, and the process procedures were not robust enough for the gravity of the consequences. The tailing off of the bell curve to maximum risk potential at the end of Project Apollo is based on the unknown of how well we learned how to mistake-proof space travel and how future projects would approach foreseeable risk. For the life cycle of the hypothetical company, Entrepreneurial startups begin with great enthusiasm and visions of breakthrough successes. This is the point of highest risk and unknown success potential. The early stages of evolution are synthesis of new processes, products, and services. As the organization grows, the culture evolves, and individuals with diverse backgrounds and experiences must come together into a cohesive team. These variables are the definition of assumed risk on the part of the entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, the principals are seldom aware of their assumed risk and its potential liabilities. The peak of the bell curve is typically when they have had breakthrough successes in the marketplace, they're making a profit, and have amassed a base of satisfied customers. While the principals continue to work on their growth plans, they are most often focused on the product or service and on marketing acuity. Seldom are they skilled in scalable business growth, process optimization, training, and awareness. Typically, complacency sets in and the curve begins to decline until some financial or other catastrophic event happens. This is the point in the business maturity where foreseeable risk should have been inculcated into the culture of the business. Absent focus on risk avoidance, the life of the business may be abruptly cut short far before the planned exit strategy can be executed. In my expert witness work, I've coined a term forensic business pathology. That's because businesses are extremely complex living organisms. Each element of the body is dependent on how well it interacts with other dependent elements. Each organization exhibits a unique personality and has attributes distinctive to its heritage and lifestyle. Organizations possess a measurable state of wellness that is in constant flux, depending on internal fitness and the relentless assault of outside pathogens. Business health can span the range from peak performance of a world-class contender to being terminally ill. Overt appearance is seldom an indicator of the state of well-being at any given moment. Symptoms of a disease may be known and treated, manifest but ignored, or go undetected, growing and consuming the organism. Foreseeable risk is a systematic diagnostic methodology that examines the health of a business using proven tools of process analysis, performance to standards, business metrics, and management system effectiveness. Used proactively, foreseeable risk is a roadmap for organizations to achieve peak health and wellness. Used as a forensic tool, it provides documented evidence of the standard of care and foreseeable risk measured against quantifiable standards of performance. For enlightened business leaders, foreseeable risk is a strategy for achieving peak performance while immunizing the organization from products liability and organizational negligence. By virtually eliminating product defects and service errors, organizations can achieve unparalleled pinnacles of customer service and defect avoidance. Up to this point, we've been exploring what risk means to each of us personally and in the context of our organizations. Now we will explore how risk is foreseeable. From Six Sigma 101, we learned that each activity has a predictable number of opportunities for outcomes to be other than planned and desired. In our quest to identify and mistake-proof each of these variables, we assign quality management tools to drive these opportunities to an acceptable minimum number. Foreseeable risk is examining each known variable through the lens of how each potential opportunity for nonconformance can be foreseen and avoided, dropping the acceptable number of errors to zero. Foreseeable risk goes on to examine how humans behave in their environment, embrace their training, and how the culture can cause them to create, hide, and exacerbate potential nonconformities. I'm currently in the middle of a lawsuit where a process operator made an error in building a critical component that led to a catastrophic failure at a customer site. According to records in her deposition, she was a lead internal auditor in her group, represented the organization during external audits, and was a member of the Continual Improvement Committee. She was also the most seasoned assembler of this product. The work instructions for this process were exemplary in their detail. My investigation included reading many depositions, quality manuals, operating procedures, and training records. My conclusions included that they had all the infrastructure in place, but it was culturally acceptable to create a certain number of defects. Those who were injured by the failure would likely differ at there being an acceptable number of defects. Finally, foreseeable risk addresses the fact that familiarity prevents us from seeing all potential risks and opportunities for nonconformities. In creating a risk avoidance culture, we'll concentrate on expanding how we assess process conformity, training, and competence. Again, I've taken license with traditional quality management tools and applied them to how I quantify foreseeable risk in products liability litigation. You may find this helpful as you begin your journey of risk avoidance. The logic of this PDCA diagram is as follows. I receive case file and conduct a snapshot audit to mine the basic facts of the case. The first step is to create a list of needed documents such as quality manuals, operational procedures, and job descriptions. This list is submitted to the attorney I'm working for. The next step is to thoroughly assess the documentation I receive and research. That produces a model that creates my opinion of the level of standard of care that a defendant exhibited. After analyzing all of the data, depositions, and court documents, I create a preliminary expert report. My report goes to the legal team to assure it's factually correct. When we're in agreement that my report fits with the litigator's strategy and is accurate, it's submitted to opposing counsel. The next step is opposing counsel subpoenaing me to be deposed. If the case does not settle out of court, the final step is testimony at trial. The reason this model is included is that it can be a valuable tool for risk assessment within your organization. I'm including some actual case examples to dramatize the risk and liability potential that may be lurking in your business. In this case, an electrician installed a surface mount 220 volt outlet for a family. It was properly installed and rated for a window air conditioner. During the night, the outlet overheated and started a fire that burned the house down and killed the residents. The photo is a reconstruction done by a forensic electrical fire expert. With a similar outlet purchased at a hardware store and the same make and model of air conditioner, the outlet began spewing smoke and eventually caught fire. The immediate cause was determined to be internal connections within the outlet that were not tightened to the required torque. Loose electrical connections in time cause resistive heating and, eventually, the result you see in the picture. My task was to audit the quality and manufacturing procedures of the defendant company. There was so little data produced that the judge allowed me to do a physical audit of the defendant's factory. It was immediately obvious that they had essentially abandoned their quality program. Unskilled workers were assembling the outlets. Their torque screwdrivers were years out of calibration. There was no inspection performed prior to putting the covers on the outlets. The samples we inspected had cross-threaded screws and untightened screws. In auditing their UL listing records, I discovered that they had changed from an approved plastic to one that was not flame retardant and had not notified UL of the change. This is an extreme case, but it clearly depicts the tragedy of ignoring foreseeable risk. For a company to be successful in risk avoidance, there must be a top-down paradigm shift in the organization's vision, mission, and value system. Whether your organizational culture has morphed organically over time or is the result of enlightened strategic planning, the risk avoidance concept is rarely part of the organization's mission. The fault is not one of pragmatic process development or selecting one quality management approach over another. It's embedded in the fundamental paradigms of organizational leadership. Risk avoidance is not taught in business school or management seminars. It's not part of business or quality management training curricula. It's not the typical job of quality professionals, but we can be the role models and facilitators. In this presentation, we are offering a new paradigm that states that defects are avoidable, not inevitable. If your value system is based on the inevitability of some level of nonconformities being acceptable, you will always have nonconformities. You will also forever be susceptible to creating foreseeable liability. Unfortunately, since ISO 9001-2015 added risk-based thinking to our lexicon, quality professionals have attempted to create compliance parameters for risk-based thinking rather than taking a 10,000-foot level assessment of its meaning and implications. At this juncture, I hope you've begun questioning risk management and especially risk-based thinking. In order to begin evaluating your QMS and business processes and practices, there are two more topics that must be reiterated. The first is the imperative for quality professionals to become immersed in the overall business management system of the company. To begin with, we don't even speak the same language. Management has had to learn the tenets of proactive quality management. Going forward, it's our imperative to learn the overall objectives and processes the business leaders have in their prime directives. Most importantly, it's our imperative to discover what is most important to senior management and adapt our processes and metrics to directly align with the business objectives. My group was retained to implement the ISO 9001-2000 transition at the asset recovery business of Dell Computer. This slide was published a year after we completed the transition. Notice bullet number 3. We proposed and implemented a division-wide business management system based on the standard, not to the standard. We discarded the quality department's traditional quality management approach for one that was an enterprise-wide commitment to quality and customer satisfaction. Most of the rest of the bullets are exactly the types of metrics that were important to the business leaders and tied to their reward system. In this case, the improvements were dramatic and beyond expectations. Of all the metrics they published, the only one that is quality related is the last one, the reduction in out-of-box audit defect rate dropping from 28 to 7%. They also did not report that the registrar cited the QMS among best in class. The fact that the implementation increased productivity by 34% per employee and reduced the needed headcount by 25%, traditional quality metrics are meaningless. We're about to embark on the tools of risk avoidance. We've already discussed the need to examine our paradigms and open our minds to different approaches. Understanding concepts and implementing proactive changes are often fraught with pitfalls. Remember, the only human that truly embraces change is a wet baby. For the sake of familiarity, let's assume your organization follows ISO 9001-2015 or any of its harmonized standards. This table is the introduction to incorporating foreseeable risk into your existing QMS. Let's examine the proposed enhancement of the elements of ISO 9001-2015. Add foreseeable risk and avoidance to your documented terms and definitions. In legal parlance, foreseeable risk is a danger which a reasonable person should anticipate as the result of his or her actions. Translated to your organization, it's a new paradigm about process optimization and mistake proofing. The definition you adopt should include a new proactivity in process assessment and competence parameters that synthesizes every potential opportunity to introduce errors. This fishbone diagram is an example of the practical examination of foreseeable risk. In this case, it helped prove negligence. Used proactively, it can help build a risk avoidance culture. Begin to visualize the context of your organization beyond the standard requirements with an immutable cultural imperative that your products and services will do no harm to a customer. Also stipulate that it will be the same priority within the company. During projects Gemini and Apollo, our collective imperative was to create no situation in which an astronaut could be harmed during a mission. We were 100% successful. After Apollo, the culture changed from winning the space race to running a business. The Shuttle Challenger disaster was a direct result of bureaucrats ignoring the culture we created of do no harm and launching a rocket in temperatures that were below established parameters for mission safety. It was also a foreseeable risk that could have been prevented. This slide includes an example of a matrix that you'll need to develop around each requirement. As you define risk avoidance in the context of your organization and culture, you can add it into your existing QMS as verbiage that complements and supplements the requirements and intent of the standard. Creating this matrix for your entire QMS will be among the most challenging tasks, but also the most rewarding for inculcating risk avoidance into your organizational culture. Section 5 establishes the commitment of senior management to create and maintain a viable QMS. The first issue is that the majority of senior managers I've worked with truly are managers of people instead of enlightened leaders who create the environment for everyone to achieve their greatest level of excellence. As we'll discuss during the implementation steps, the first recommendation I make is to discard the traditional quality policy and replace it with a vision, mission, and value set that senior management will make immutable to the culture of the organization. Adding the commitment to do no harm goes a long way in creating risk avoidance culture. If your job descriptions include other duties as assigned, they're meaningless. In a risk avoidance culture, roles and responsibilities have exact and measurable parameters that are absolute requirements for every person performing that function. They also have clear and concise rules for measuring competence that are tied to both rewards and negative consequences. When I read the draft of ISO 9001-2015 that first included risk-based thinking, it set off an alarm bell of looming disaster. Organizations that had created effective preventive action programs and built them into their processes were now being told to think about risk instead. It was like TC-176 threw a hand grenade across the transom of the quality community. We'll discuss this in more detail in the implementation section. Support helps create the working infrastructure of the QMS that establishes the baseline for the operations section. Again, examine each of your directives for inclusion of risk avoidance tools. Operations is where the most opportunities for nonconformities to occur. Whatever operational procedures, work instructions, and process controls you have in place need to be scrutinized for potential risk and liability. Performance evaluation must go beyond traditional assessment and the mandatory inputs and outputs of management review meetings. This is the best opportunity to audit risk and evaluate liability exposure. Incorporating the tenets of foreseeable risk and risk avoidance into your continual improvement initiatives will make your organization virtually bulletproof from customer issues and from civil liability. This table is constructed from more than 40 years of experience working with more than 700 companies. It's designed as a self-evaluation of where your organization ranks on a 1 to 10 scale. Share it with your colleagues and decision makers. If your company ranks between 5 and 7, you absolutely need an overhaul of your business model and quality goals. If you're between 3 and 4, implementing risk avoidance will add a new dimension of excellence to your products, services, and customer satisfaction. If you're 1 or 2, please invite me for a visit. I'd like to write a book about your company. From the previous table, determine where your organization ranks today, and then identify which level you're striving for. This QMS reassessment process must change the focus to quality as a profit center, stupid-proofing processes and products, developing metrics that drive key business indicators, avoid defects reaching a customer to achieve a perfect scorecard. Process control must include the vision, mission, and values being immutable. If it's culturally feasible, assess your compensation program. Consider a risk and reward program that has incentives for defect-free performance and penalties for creating nonconformities. Recast your version of your plan, do, check, act to complement the check function with an avoidance component. Assess the control limits of your metrics to strive for zero nonconformities, not an acceptable number. Use every defect report, customer input, and corrective action as gifts for your new goal of delivering defect-free products and services. Becoming a champion of foreseeable risk starts with embracing the concept that all nonconformities and process deviations are avoidable. Process design must include a step that focuses on how upstream and downstream processes can cause variability to be built into each process. Another key element is to stupid-proof each process so that variations in operators' acuity on any given day can't introduce defects. Process auditing must be revisited, and auditors who are trained in foreseeable risk will assess processes not only for conformance and continual improvement opportunities, but also for chances to eliminate potential risk. Process improvement tools such as root cause analysis, 5S, just-in-time, Kanban, visual management, and FEMA must also be inculcated with the tools of foreseeable risk outlined later in this presentation. Assessing foreseeable risk is the next level in quality management. It's not reinventing your business processes or adding more overhead for ensuring conformance. Assess and revise the steps of each process in your organization. Include mandatory questions for the process operators to answer in the affirmative before moving the product or service to the next process step. Am I certain that my work is defect-free before passing it to the next process step? Am I solely accountable to the next process operator for my work product? How can the owner of the next process use my work output badly or inappropriately? How can a customer be affected by the work output of each process? Add a step to your FEMA process or impanel a risk avoidance committee. Include individuals who have no formal involvement in the process but are dedicated to the organization's success. Add these steps to your analyses. During design and process FEMAs, add a round of questioning about how a customer could possibly use this product or service badly, stupidly, or for the wrong purpose. Review customer complaints, warranty reports, and repairs with a deliberate focus on what could have been done to avoid each issue. Customer misuse will not be a relevant factor in a lawsuit if you have not adequately anticipated possible misuse. Continually model the culture of a defect will never leave my workstation. A defective product or service, therefore, will never reach a customer. There are advanced tools of foreseeable risk and risk avoidance available for the new champions of the culture shift, including the one depicted on this slide. My book, Foreseeable Risk, was written to help litigators utilize the tools of foreseeable risk as a winning strategy in litigation. The book also contains more detailed strategies for enlightened leaders that have made the commitment to drive risk and liability from their organizations and avoid having to face me as an expert witness. Unfortunately, many ISO 9001-2015 certified companies are spending time thinking about risk. Few companies have embraced risk avoidance, and way too many never consider the tenets of risk avoidance we've covered so far in this session. In another tragic case, a family purchased an artificial Christmas tree from a major retailer. The tree was pre-lit, meaning that it had festive lights pre-wired into the trunk and branches. In the plaintiff's home, the tree was left on overnight. Parts of the wiring that were poorly assembled caused overheating and a resulting fire. 2 youngsters perished in the fire. The complete list of recommended action items appears in the Quality Progress article. The following is a review of the topics we've covered so far. Develop an irrevocable organizational goal that no critical defects shall ever reach a customer. Use appropriate quality process improvement tools to map all business processes, their interrelationships, and their dependencies with a focus on risk avoidance. Assess each process on its own and assign metrics for effectiveness, quality, and reliability. Dissect each process until all opportunities for defects or mistakes are identified, understood, and eliminated. Continually improve the processes until they are innately safe and reliable. Ensure metrics are in place and continually monitored to warn of pending problems before they occur. Work to eliminate the practices of defect inspection, rework, and punishment. Replace them with individual and team accountability for the outcome of everyone's work. Continually elicit and scrutinize customer feedback for potential issues. Correct them immediately and proactively. Consider them a gift of extreme valuable information. Have a clear roadmap of your business, where it's been and where it's planned to go. Regularly share progress with everyone. Be aware of the organization's legal duty of care, standard of care, and foreseeable risk. Reminder, risk avoidance is a culture. In this case, the manufacturer of the golf cart stated in deposition that they had built into their budget paying off a certain number of lawsuits each year. This call to action recognizes that the only human that truly embraces change is a wet baby. Proposing that organizations adopt fundamental culture shifts is right up there with a root canal and pain intensity. Most organizations see quality management as an overhead expense that requires a police force to be effective. For business leaders, formal quality management too often is mandated by customer requirements or as a fix to product or customer issues. For quality professionals, it's a culture of tools and certifications that exist as the foundation for their very existence. All of these paradigms must be revisited in the context of avoiding foreseeable risk. Business leaders often see new concepts, such as those proposed herein, as more bureaucracy bubbling up from the quality department. My fellow quality professionals, if we, as a professional, do not refocus our energies and work on creating customer satisfaction, increasing return on investment, and holding everyone accountable for their work output, our litany of quality tools will be forever reactive instead of proactive. One way to get the undivided attention of senior management is to sort through the morass of definitions of risk noted in the introduction and synthesize a culture of risk avoidance that is unique to your organization. It must replace preventive action, risk assessment, risk management, and incorporate standards, statutes, regulations, and industry norms into the mainstream workflow. Seek out every opportunity to remove traditional overhead and toll gate functions and incorporate them as process steps that have a positive return on investment. In doing so, you will increase your value to the organization as an expert in avoiding expensive customer defect issues. You also may develop a new skill set as an internal expert witness in products liability and organizational excellence. Finally, if you are frustrated in an attempt to get attention of senior management about risk avoidance, show them the copy of slide 19 with the Dell computer report. Thank you.